The Galactic Council chamber was vast and cold. 17 different species sat around a table that stretched longer than a human building. The walls displayed the status of the Vex Collective, once the most powerful force in known space. Now those displays showed only fractures and failures. The great alliance that had held power for 10,000 years was breaking apart. Ambassador David Monroe sat in a small chair designed for humans, which meant it was uncomfortable. Everything in this place was uncomfortable. He had been on the Tribunal's home station for only 3 days, and already he wanted to leave. The other ambassadors looked at him with barely hidden disgust, as if a human's presence alone could lower the intelligence of the room. The Kartian ambassador spoke first. His species looked like large cats with metal implants replacing half their bodies. When he moved, his metal parts made soft sounds that echoed through the chamber. His voice was sharp and cutting. He said the Trell Empire was finished. Their queen was blind. How could a blind leader rule an empire? The Karshan wanted to absorb the Trell territories. They wanted the power and the resources. The other ambassadors made sounds of agreement. They thought the Karshan was right. The Trell had once been great, but now they were weak. Blindness in a leader was weakness. That was what everyone believed. Then the Tribunal Master stood up. He was ancient, from a species that had learned to live for thousands of years. His voice carried the weight of decision. He said the Tribunal would not allow one species to simply take another's territory. There must be balance. Then he said something that made David sit up straight in his uncomfortable chair. The Tribunal Master said they would form a marriage alliance. The Trell Queen would marry a representative from a younger species. This would bind them together with traditional law. David heard his own name spoken. The other ambassadors laughed. A human. They would marry the blind queen to a primitive human. This was a joke to them. A marriage that meant nothing. David tried to object, but the council had already decided. He was dismissed from the chamber with instructions to prepare for the ceremony. This would happen in 3 days. David spent those 3 days learning about the Trell. The information he found was not good. The Trell were an insectoid species, meaning they had evolved from insect-like creatures. They communicated through vibrations as much as through sound. Queen Lysara had been born blind, a rare condition in her species. Everyone said her blindness made her weak, but when David read more carefully, he found something different. Queen Lysara had kept the Trell Empire stable for 40 years. Under her rule, they had maintained peace with all neighbors. They had built trade networks that brought wealth to her people. They had created art and music and literature. A blind leader had done this. That seemed important, but David was not sure why. The ceremony took place in a vast hall that belonged to the tribunal. Servants dressed David in formal clothes that felt wrong on his body. Everything about this moment felt wrong. He was being used as a political tool. He was being married to a queen he had never met. He was about to make a promise he did not understand. Queen Lysara arrived on the Armo Guide, a young Trell who wore formal armor. David saw her for the first time. She was tall, taller than him by a full head. Her body was smooth and dark, the color of deep water. Where her eyes should have been, there was smooth skin with no eyes at all. This was normal for a blind Trell, he had learned. She moved with complete confidence through the hall. She did not use the guide's arm to walk. The guide simply walked beside her, and Lysara navigated through knowledge of the space and something else David could not name. She knew where everything was without seeing it. When she turned toward him, David felt her attention fix on him completely. The ancient ceremony began. Words were spoken in the old language of the tribunal. Oaths were made. Promises were spoken. David promised to honor the alliance. Lysara promised the same. Then they were married. After the ceremony, Protocol demanded that the couple spend the night together in the royal quarters. This was tradition, though everyone in the chamber understood that the marriage was political, not personal. The other ambassadors made jokes as David and Lysara left the hall. The royal quarters were beautiful. High ceilings, wide windows that showed the stars beyond the station, furniture that belonged to the Trell, all smooth curves and soft surfaces. David stood awkwardly near the entrance. Lysara walked further into the room, her hands held in front of her, feeling the space. She turned toward him and spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but strong. She asked his name, though she already knew it. He told her it was David Monroe. He asked for her name, though he already knew that too. She told him she was Lysara, Queen of the Trell. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it meant something. She said she understood this was political. She understood that the tribunal thought this was a joke. She could feel his anger and confusion in the air around him. She could feel the way his heart beat too fast. She could feel that he did not want to be here. David was surprised. He asked her how she could feel those things. Lysara explained that her blindness was not a problem. It was simply different. She sensed the world through vibrations and changes in air and movement. She could feel a person's emotions by detecting the very small changes in their breathing and heartbeat. She could sense truth and lies by the same method. She said she could feel that David was a good person. This surprised her. The tribunal had sent them a primitive human, and they expected her to be disappointed. But David's heart was honest. His mind was not tangled with greed and politics and anger. He was afraid, yes, but his fear was clean. His fear came from being lost, not from wanting to hurt anyone. David did not know what to say. Lysara asked him to sit. They talked through the night. He told her about Earth and how harsh it was. He told her about human families and how humans survived through helping each other. He told her about his life before the tribunal took him away. Lysara listened. She did not watch him because she could not, but she heard every word. She felt every emotion. By the time morning came, something had changed between them. They were still strangers. They were still married for political reasons, but they were no longer enemies. When servants came to collect them in the morning, they found the ambassador and the queen sitting together, not touching, but comfortable in the silence. This surprised everyone who saw them. The marriage was supposed to be miserable. Instead, David and Lysara seemed to have found something rare, something that would change everything. Days turned into weeks. David and Lysara remained in the royal quarters, isolated from the rest of the tribunal station. Protocol said they should stay separate from the council during this time. No one objected. They wanted the humans and the blind queen away from important matters. This gave David and Lysara time they never expected to have together. The conversations grew longer and deeper. Lysara taught David how the Trell thought about problems. She explained that, without sight, her people had learned to understand relationships between things instead of the individual things themselves. She could feel how emotions flowed between people like currents in water. She could sense trust and betrayal before they happened, simply by feeling the shifts in behavior. David learned that when Lysara moved through space, she was not blind at all. She was seeing something completely different from what David saw. She felt the vibrations of walls. She sensed the small movements of air around objects. She knew where he was in the room by the sound of his breathing and the warmth of his body. To her, seeing and blindness meant nothing. She simply perceived the world differently. One day, Lysara asked David to teach her about human warfare. She said the tribunal saw humans as simple soldiers, animals that could be controlled and pointed at enemies. She wanted to know if that was true. David spent hours explaining human history. He talked about how humans had survived on a world that tried to kill them constantly. He talked about how humans learned to work together because survival alone was impossible. Lysara was fascinated. She said that humans had something most advanced species had forgotten. Humans understood that strength came from cooperation, not from individual power. Our own species had once believed this, but as they became more advanced, they had lost it. Now the Trell believed that a great mind could rule alone. She had survived this long because her mind was great, but her empire was still declining because her people no longer believed in unity. David asked her what she wanted to do about it. Lysara was quiet for a long time. Then she asked David a strange question. She asked what would happen if her blindness was not a weakness but an advantage. What if the two of them together could see the world completely? David did not understand at first. Lysara explained. His eyes could see surfaces and physical threats. Her senses could perceive intentions and emotions and the truth beneath what people said. Humans understood emotion and connection. The Trell understood patterns and systems. Together, they might understand things that neither species could understand alone. David began to see what she meant. He started to describe what he saw, and Lysara described what she felt. When he talked about a Kartian ambassador's aggressive posture, she described the fear beneath the aggression. When she described the political tensions in the council, he explained how similar tensions had torn apart human societies in the past. They formed a theory together. They created a way of thinking that used both sight and perception, both emotion and logic. It was not Trell thinking, and it was not human thinking. It was something new. Lysara began to teach David the language of vibrations. She would tap on the floor and David would feel the vibrations. Soon he understood that different patterns meant different things. It was like a language written in movement instead of sound. David could not feel them as well as Lysara, but he could learn enough to understand. David taught Lysara about human literature and art. He brought her books and had them read to her, and she listened with complete attention. She said that human art understood something important. It understood that meaning came from emotion, not just from fact. A painting could tell the truth even if it was not accurate. A story could be true even if it was not real. They spent many hours simply talking. David told her about his family. He explained that humans were bound by love and obligation, not just by biology. Lysara told him about her childhood, growing up blind in a species that valued sight. She said she had learned early that being different meant being alone. Unless you found someone who valued your difference. As the weeks passed, something shifted in the royal quarters. They began to move around each other with ease. David no longer needed to announce when he was moving. Lysara could feel him through the small changes in air and vibration. They developed a comfort together that neither had expected. One night, Lysara said something that changed everything. She said that the tribunal had made a mistake in putting them together. They had thought it was a joke. But jokes sometimes reveal truth. She and David were two broken pieces that made something whole. Humans and Trell were not enemies. They were incomplete without each other. David asked what she meant by this. Lysara said that she wanted to propose something to the council, but she could not do it alone. She needed David to help her. Together, they would suggest a new way of governing. A way that combined human understanding of emotion with Trell understanding of patterns. A way that used both sight and perception to see truth completely. David knew this was dangerous. The tribunal would laugh at them. They would mock the idea that a human and a blind alien could know anything about governance. But he also knew that Lysara was right. Together, they had seen something that neither could have seen alone. He told her yes. That night, they stopped being a political marriage. They became a true partnership. Not in the way the tribunal expected, with physical bonds and romantic promises, but in a deeper way. They became two minds that thought together, two perspectives that made each other complete. When the day came to return to the council, David and Lysara walked in together. The other ambassadors expected to see weakness and failure. Instead, they saw something unexpected. They saw two creatures from different worlds moving with perfect understanding of each other. They saw a human and an alien who had somehow become unified. The council laughed at first, but Lysara and David did not flinch. They had come to propose something that would change everything. They had come to reshape the way the galaxy thought about power and leadership. They had come to show that together they could see what no one else could see. The council chamber fell silent when David and Lysara walked to the center platform. The other ambassadors stopped their conversations. For weeks, the couple had remained isolated. Now they had returned with something to present. The council was curious but skeptical. David spoke first. His voice was clear and strong. He said that the Vex Collective was falling apart because all of them were looking at the wrong things. They looked at military power and territory and resources. They looked at what they could take from each other. They saw competitors and enemies. This was why the alliance was breaking. Then Lysara spoke. Her voice carried authority that the council had never heard from her before. She said that David was right, but there was more. She said that every ambassador in this room was hiding something. Every species was preparing for betrayal. Every leader was planning how to gain advantage when the others were weak. She could feel this. She could sense it in their breathing, in the way their bodies moved, in the vibrations of their stress and fear. The council became angry. The Kartian ambassador stood up and said this was nonsense. The Trell Queen could not sense anything. She was blind and delusional. This human had poisoned her mind with primitive ideas. Lysara did not respond to his anger. Instead, she asked David a simple question. She asked him to describe what he saw in the Kartian ambassador. David looked at the large cat-like creature and described his aggressive posture. He described how his metal implants shifted with tension. He described the way his eyes moved toward the other ambassadors, calculating power and weakness. Then Lysara turned toward the Kartian, her blind face perfectly aimed at him. She said that she could feel something else. She could feel the fear underneath his aggression. She could feel that he was worried about losing power. She could feel that one of the other species had made a secret agreement with him, and he was not sure they would keep it. She could feel his doubt about his own position. The Kartian ambassador's face went pale. He started to object, but before he could speak, another ambassador stood up. A species called the Vith, small crystalline creatures that communicated through sound frequencies. The Vith ambassador said that Lysara was correct. The Kartian had approached them about a secret alliance. They had been planning to betray the agreement. Chaos broke out in the council chamber. Several ambassadors started shouting accusations at each other. The tribunal master called for order, but order was broken. Everyone started talking at once, revealing secrets and accusations. When quiet finally returned, David spoke again. He explained what he and Lysara were proposing. They were not proposing a new military alliance. They were proposing a new way of governing. Instead of hiding and betrayal, they proposed transparency. Instead of exploitation, they proposed cooperation based on honest understanding. Lysara added that this was possible because of what humans brought. David's species understood something that most advanced civilizations had forgotten. Humans understood that cooperation worked better than domination. Humans understood that helping others made everyone stronger. This was not weakness. This was actual strength. She said that with David's emotional understanding and her perceptive ability, they could create a system where deception was impossible. They could create a government based on truth. When leaders could not lie, they would learn to cooperate instead of fighting. The council was silent. Then several smaller species started asking questions. The Vith wanted to know more. The Soem, a species of gentle beings, said this might work. Even some larger species seemed interested, but the Kartian did not accept defeat. Over the following days, they worked in secret to discredit David and Lysara. They spread rumors that the human was controlling the blind queen. They said that his primitive mind had confused her. They organized other species to reject the proposal. At the next council meeting, they announced a formal challenge. They said that if David and Lysara truly believed in their ideas, they should prove it. They should submit to questions from the council about their claims. They should explain exactly how a human and a blind alien could possibly understand anything important. David and Lysara prepared carefully for this challenge. They spent days reviewing information about the Kartian and their allies. They prepared evidence. They prepared answers. But more importantly, they prepared something else. When the challenge began, the Kartian ambassador presented documents. He showed weapons manufacturing records that he claimed proved other species were building war machines. He said this proved that the tribunal was falling apart into chaos. He said that the only solution was Kartian leadership. Only they were strong enough to control the chaos. Then David presented his own documents. He revealed that the weapons manufacturing had been ordered by the Kartian themselves. He showed financial records and communications. He proved that the Kartian had been lying. But the most powerful moment came when Lysara spoke. She said that she could feel something in the Kartian delegation. She could feel fear, yes. But more than that, she could feel shame. The ambassadors from the Kartian's own eyes could feel it too. They could sense that the Kartian had lied. One by one, the Kartian's allies withdrew their support. Smaller species who had been afraid to speak up began to support David and Lysara. The situation reversed in a single meeting. The Kartian ambassador demanded a final solution. He invoked an ancient protocol that allowed for trial by combat. He said that David and Lysara could not win by talking and deception. They would need to prove their strength in battle. He gathered 3 systems to his side. If they won, the tribunal would dissolve and the galaxy would return to war and conquest. David and Lysara accepted the challenge without hesitation. They knew what was coming. They knew it'd be dangerous. But they also knew that if they succeeded, they would change everything. They had weapons that the Kartian did not understand. They had each other. They had the ability to see completely while their enemies saw only partially. This would be a battle unlike any the galaxy had witnessed. This would be the battle that would reshape everything. The combat arena was a vast open space inside the tribunal station. Weapons were forbidden here, except for those carried by the combatants. The Kartian had sent their best warriors. 3 of them. Each one wore armor reinforced with metal and technology. Each one carried weapons that could cut through steel. They had been trained for war across 17 systems. David and Lysara walked into the arena with nothing but simple clothes and the faith they had in each other. The other ambassadors watched from above, protected behind clear barriers. Some of them were already certain of the outcome. A human and a blind alien against 3 trained Kartian warriors. This would be over quickly. The tribunal master announced the beginning of combat. The Kartian warriors moved forward, confident and slow, like predators that knew their prey had no chance. Then everything changed. Lysara closed her eyes. Though this meant nothing for someone who could not see, she extended her senses outward, feeling the movement of the warriors as they approached. She could sense their positions. She could sense the vibrations of the station floor beneath their feet. She could sense the slight changes in air pressure as they moved. David stood still, watching her face. When her eyes closed, he closed his own eyes too. He had learned to trust her perception completely. In the past weeks, he had trained himself to feel the vibrations through the floor. He could not sense the world as completely as she could, but he could sense enough. The first Kartian warrior rushed forward, his metal hand extended to strike. Lysara felt him coming and told David. Her voice was soft, but he heard it perfectly. She said his name. She said left. Nothing more was needed. David moved left without opening his eyes. The Kartian warrior's strike hit nothing but empty air. The impact of his punch cracked the floor. He was surprised. The second warrior tried to attack from the side. Lysara sensed the vibrations of his movement. She told David, and he moved again. A blast of energy passed so close that David felt the heat on his skin, but it did not touch him. The third warrior attacked from above, jumping to strike from a higher position. Lysara felt the vibrations of his jump. She called out, and David threw himself sideways. The warrior landed where David had been a moment before. The Kartian were confused. They were fighting something they did not understand. This human was moving with perfect accuracy, despite having his eyes closed. He was not looking at them. He was not guessing. He was moving with certainty that came from somewhere else, and it came from Lysara. She was calling out directions with absolute precision. She could sense the warriors' movements before they finished them. She could predict where they would be based on their muscle movements and the vibrations they made. To the Kartian, it seemed impossible. To Lysara, it was simple. She was simply reading the world in her own language. The first warrior became frustrated. He began to move faster, to make his attacks more violent and unpredictable. This was a mistake. The faster he moved, the more vibrations he created. The more vibrations, the clearer the picture for Lysara. David understood what was happening. He opened his eyes and began to actively help. He could see where the warriors were. Lysara could feel where they would be. Together, they were better than any single sense. When the first warrior tried to strike, David moved based on Lysara's direction, but he also saw the warrior's approach. He began to move even faster, beginning to anticipate before she could call out. Their minds were becoming synchronized. Her awareness and his vision merged into something that was neither but both. The warriors tried to change tactics. They attempted to separate David from Lysara. Two of them attacked David directly while the third tried to reach Lysara. But David could not be separated from Lysara because he did not need to see her to know where she was. They were connected. When warriors tried to isolate him, Lysara's voice guided him. When warriors tried to isolate her, David's eyes protected her. They moved like a single organism with two bodies. The combat lasted only 7 minutes, though it felt like an hour. By the end, all 3 Kartian warriors were on the ground. They were not dead. They had not been killed. David and Lysara had fought only to defend themselves, to prove their point. When the first warrior fell, David stood over him and did not strike the killing blow. When the second warrior tried to flee, Lysara did not pursue him with violence. When the third warrior offered surrender, David accepted it. This was the moment that changed everything. The council expected savagery. They expected David to kill his defeated enemies out of human anger. They expected Lysara to seek revenge for her weaknesses. Instead, they saw something that shocked them. They saw mercy. David helped the fallen warriors to their feet. Lysara spoke to them, her voice firm but not cruel. She said that they had made their choice. They had chosen to serve aggression and conquest. But they did not have to continue on that path. She offered them a choice. They could return to their leaders with news of their defeat, or they could choose something different. The first warrior, the one who had attacked most aggressively, began to cry. Crying was not common for his species, and the tribunal had never witnessed it. He said that he was tired. He was tired of war. He was tired of the Kartian belief that strength came only from domination. He wanted to know if there was another way. Lysara told him there was. David added that humans had learned long ago that the strongest thing a being could do was choose mercy instead of revenge. Not because mercy was weakness, but because mercy was actual strength. It changed enemies into allies. It created the possibility of peace. The Karshan leader, watching from above, attempted to call for more warriors. But something extraordinary happened. The other ambassadors, the ones who had been watching, did not allow it. The Vith called for an end to the challenge. The Soem demanded that the council accept David and Lysara's vision. More than half the council species declared themselves in support of David and Lysara's new Wait Out 3 systems broke from the Karshan's control that night. By morning, the Tribunal Master announced a restructuring of the council. David and Lysara would be the new leaders of a reformed Vex collective. The old way of conquest and dominance was finished. The new way of understanding and cooperation was beginning. It had taken only one night and one battle, but that night had rewrote history. 3 months after the battle, the galaxy looked different. The Tribunal Station had been restructured. The old seats of power had been removed. New council chambers had been built around a central platform where David and Lysara could sit with perfect understanding of the space around them. The work of building a new galactic society had begun. It was harder than the battle had been. Words and patience were more difficult than combat and clarity of purpose. Species that had fought each other for centuries had to learn to sit in the same room without violence. Lysara and David had to teach 1,000 diplomats how to think differently. They had to show the galaxy that cooperation was possible, that trust could be built, that understanding could replace conquest. David created what he called the Council of Transparency. He explained the concept to species that had kept secrets for millennia. He said that all agreements would be public. All negotiations would be recorded. All resource sharing would be documented and fair. Species would no longer be able to betray each other because there would be nowhere to hide. Lysara extended this with her own innovation. She created positions for what she called truth readers. These were trained to sense deception and dishonesty in the same way she did. They would serve in all diplomatic meetings, ensuring that what was said matched what was felt. For the first time in galactic history, no one could lie to another species and succeed. The Karshan at first resisted fiercely. They demanded that their own warriors be allowed in negotiations to balance the truth readers. David agreed, but he added something unexpected. He said that human counselors would be present too, species that understood emotion and motivation. The Karshan had their warriors for show of strength. The humans would bring understanding. It was not perfect balance, but it was balance. Within the first month, 12 separate territorial disputes were resolved peacefully. Species that had prepared for war began to negotiate instead. The resources they had gathered for weapons were redirected to trade and infrastructure. Entire economies began to shift from manufacturing violence to manufacturing peace. But not everyone accepted the new way. Some leaders on the Karshan worlds refused to acknowledge the new tribunal. They began to build their own military forces in secret. They planned to destroy David and Lysara and retake control of the galaxy. Lysara felt the growing threat through the Karshan delegation. She could sense their mounting fear and aggression. She warned David, and he took action quickly. But this time, he did not use combat. Instead, he used knowledge. David presented evidence of the secret military preparations. He showed how the rogue Karshan leaders were violating the agreements they had made. But instead of calling for punishment, he did something that shocked everyone. He offered them a choice. He said that the Karshan had been shaped by a harsh evolutionary history. They had learned to survive through dominance and control. That was not weakness. That was strength developed for survival. But now the galaxy did not require that kind of strength anymore. The Karshan could choose to transform that strength into something new. Some of the rogue Karshan leaders rejected this. They launched an attack on a smaller species to prove their power. David and Lasara responded, but again not with warfare. They cut off all trade with the attacking worlds. They blocked their access to galactic resources. They made it impossible for them to survive alone. Within weeks, the rogue leaders were forced to choose between total destruction and cooperation. Most chose cooperation. Some did not, and they were removed from power by their own people, who were tired of the cost of war. By the end of the first year, something remarkable had happened. War had become impossible in the region of space controlled by the Tribunal. Not because violence was prevented by force, but because every species had learned that cooperation brought more benefit than conquest. Trade expanded beyond anyone's imagination. Species that had been isolated began to share knowledge. The Trell's understanding of complex systems combined with human emotional intelligence created new philosophies and new technologies. The Karshan's warrior discipline combined with Vith innovation produced incredible engineering advances. The galaxy was transforming. In their private quarters, high above the council chambers, David and Lasara spent their evenings in what had become their favorite place. It was a garden that David had created, with plants from Earth and from the Trell homeworld growing together. Lasara moved through this space with complete freedom. She did not need to see the flowers to know that they were blooming. She could feel the subtle changes in air currents as they opened their petals. She could sense the presence of the plants through their vibrations in the soil. David would sometimes sit in silence and just watch her move. She had become his complete opposite and his perfect mirror at the same time. Where he saw, she sensed. Where he was limited by his eyes, she was unlimited by her blindness. Together they were whole. One evening, Lasara sat beside David and took his hand. She said she had something to tell him. She said she could feel a change in her own body. Something was growing. Life was beginning inside her. They were going to have a child. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. He understood what this meant. A child born of human and Trell, of sight and perception, of emotion and logic. A child who would understand both worlds completely. A child who would be the symbol of what they had built. Lasara felt his joy through the vibrations of his heartbeat. She said she could feel that he was happy. She could feel that he believed this was right. She could feel that their life together was only beginning. The news spread through the tribunal within days. The birth of a hybrid child was announced as a symbol of the new age. Species that had once declared themselves incompatible began to make their own alliances. Other humans requested permission to join the diplomatic corps. Other Trell offered themselves as truth readers. Years later, historians would look back and understand that the real turning point had not been the battle. The real turning point had been two creatures from different worlds who learned to see through each other's eyes. Who learned that blindness and sight were not opposites but complements. Who learned that a human's capacity for emotion and a Trell's capacity for perception could create something greater than either alone. The blind alien queen and the human ambassador had not just married each other. They had married the galaxy to a new future. And the night of that first great battle had been the night that rewrote history for all beings in all the stars to come.